BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Welcome to Illuminated from BBC Radio 4, the home for creative one-off documentaries that shed light on hidden worlds. All human life is here, just waiting to be discovered.
We never really think about what's going on inside our body and the vital organs that keep us alive. The lungs.
When my lungs are happy and I'm breathing normally and they're not under any strain, there's a lightness, there's an ease.
The heart. What about the brain?
How you're thinking is just a pattern of pings flowing between your neurons. That's the kind of key concept that I try and get over.
I'm Maia, and I'm an audio producer. I met 5 people, each with a unique relationship to one vital organ: the heart, liver, lungs, brain, and the kidneys.
So there's the physical absence, but also this constant awareness of the remaining kidney having to work harder, trying to do the job of both kidneys.
These 5 people shared their stories and tried to put into words their connection with their organ.
In Chinese medicine, the liver is like a wind, so they have the blow sound.
Working in audio, and as a composer, it was what this relationship could sound like that captured me the most. This idea resonated with each person as well. So together, we designed a soundscape, a musical articulation of what their relationship with their organ feels like.
I'm Alison Moore, and I'm a writer. I write short stories and novels.
This is Alison. Her story is about her kidney, or rather, the one she gave away.
I donated a kidney to my husband. It is quite daunting, donating a kidney, or it was for me, but it was also so important. There was no question that I wasn't going to do it.
As she chose to give away her organ, Alison received an unexpected opportunity.
In the same month that I knew I was going to be donating this kidney, Dead Ink Books got in touch to invite me to write this horror novella under a pseudonym, and I decided to write about this experience. I'd drafted the story in advance and done some research. So while I was in the hospital, I was taking notes on my phone about exactly what happens, the order things are done in, all the details. We both went down to theatre, and my kidney was taken out and then was put into Dan, and then we recovered over the subsequent days. And meanwhile, I was writing thousands of words of notes on my phone. So when I came out of the hospital, I started feeding those notes into my story. And in fact, while I was writing the notes, I noticed that I was writing them in the third person. So everything that was happening to me, in my notes, it was happening in the third person to the character. I think there are 2 ways in which it was very helpful for me to have the novella to write. One is that it helped me to process the experience. But the other thing is that because I was writing a horror story, so it has this horror ending, but the majority of it is just weird and uncanny. And that does echo the way it felt. So a lot of the things that happen in the story are really quite odd, quite weird. And many of them did happen to me.
When you think about your kidneys, what are the first words that come to mind when you think of sounds?
Soft, slippery, smooth. When the kidney's removed, I think of dissonance or conflict in respect of the loss of the kidney, but also consonance in the ability of the kidney to be transplanted and to carry on working for somebody else.
When you think of soft and slippery, is that quite a high sound? Is it a low sound?
Lower. It's lower. So there'd be a muffled element, I suppose. So it's not one thing on its own being soft, it's moving around amongst all the other organs.
You've already given it a journey. You've kind of started with that soft and squishy and supple, and then it goes through a shock of being removed. And kind of if you think of what that shock would sound like, how would you kind of go about describing that?
There'd be some kind of stopping. So this sudden loss. But as violent as that is, I think I would always want to pair it with the fact that it's instantly going into the other body. So it's balanced. It's amazing that the recovery and the way the body bounced back and the remaining kidney comes in to fill the gap. I don't know if you can capture that sense of separation where my kidneys could be on opposite sides of the world.
You mentioned about the thing about the uncanny and the uncanny sound. Is that sound underlying all the time kind of a sinister hum?
Yeah, sinister's an interesting word because I would very much want to include in that the fact that I find it comforting. The nature of the uncanny for me is quite soft, deep, like a soothing voice.
Alison shared her story with me, and I tried to reflect it in sound, composing a musical sketch. Listening back to it, it didn't seem significant enough to capture the depth of her experience. So I turned to David Owen Norris. David's a renowned classical composer. In David's hands, my sketches became scores. He set each organ to one section of a symphony orchestra. And Alison's kidneys became the woodwind. The brain became the percussion.
If you wanted to make music that was reminiscent of how I understand the brain, patterns of pings. So it would be a fairly percussive kind of sound, but you could use different notes for different neurons, and they could interact and fire in patterns. I'm Steve Ferber. I'm an emeritus professor in the computer science department at the University of Manchester. The human brain remains one of the great mystery frontiers of science. So we know a lot about the details of the neurons and synapses that make up the brain, but we still don't have a sort of an overview of how the brain operates. My interest in the human brain really grew out of my interest in computers. So from the late 1970s, I was involved in the design and development of conventional computing systems. And after 20 years of doing this, the computers were enormously more powerful, but they still struggled to do things that we humans find quite easy, even when we're very young, such as the job of recognizing your mother. And that interest morphed into thinking about how we might use computers to advance our understanding of brains. I certainly understand more about brains in general as a result of my work. I'm not sure I understand myself any better, but my work does cause me to think about what's happening inside my brain from time to time. I think the brain is ultimately understandable, but it's a large, complex system. So we have a lot of the jigsaw pieces. We may not have all of them, and we're not quite sure how many we need. But yes, we're beginning to piece together bits of the total puzzle.
So you're imagining the human brain as a sound.
Patterns of pings.
So you'd have like ping and ping and ping and ping and ping.
Yes, different pitches, because they have a sort of a very pingy onset I suppose if you started with a fairly random pattern of pings and then it gradually morphed into something that had more meaning.
And they start to harmonise?
Yes, and those harmonies represent coherent thought. Could even have a dreamy bit. We tend to think that our brain is awake during the day and that we switch it off at night, but nothing could be further from the truth. The brain is still highly active at night.
That's interesting in the sense of once we go into a sleep, that's the time where our brain's not stimulated, so it can start to create the order.
Yes, and of course there are rhythms in sleep brain activity. There's this theory that the brain operates towards the edge of chaos because that's where information potential is maximized. But if you get too close, you go over the edge, and that's not good. And so sleep is about really renormalizing the brain, a sort of homeostatic process that brings the brain back into a settled state for the next day. So your music could effectively have a daytime, somewhat chaotic phase, and then the nighttime, smoother and more rhythmic phase.
What kind of rhythm? Like steady like that? Or?
I think more sort of swell, more like waves on the sea. So swell and then wane and wax, and something that has quite a sort of human frequency to the rhythm.
And then when it moves from sleeping back into waking, what does that kind of transition sound like?
As soon as we open our eyes, our brain is exposed to a stream of inputs. Initially they're familiar because we're usually in a familiar place when we wake up. But then things start to happen and unfamiliar inputs come. So I guess, again, it's sitting there gently, rhythmically producing the expected patterns. And then a note appears that doesn't fit. And then that musical structure adapts until eventually that jarring note becomes an integral part of the new structure.
And now we come to the liver, the body's largest internal organ.
Liver in Chinese medicine is like emotional organs. They manage the emotions and represent also the life force. My name is Zhongjiao Tan. I'm a Chinese medical doctor.
Dr. Tan has lived in the UK for 26 years and runs a traditional Chinese medical practice in the southeast of England.
The liver like harmony. They store the blood, they store the qi. So for me, my liver is no problem at all. Only when I'm giving birth.
Dr. Tan gave birth to her second daughter in the UK. Her and her husband were alone.
So no family around me. You don't feel directly love. And she's premature, only 7 months to come out. Oh, it's so bad. That is a bad experience.
Her second daughter was born premature and immediately started experiencing problems.
When you're giving birth, you're losing lots of blood. So in Chinese, if you're losing lots of blood, your liver cannot store the blood. Your liver can dysfunction. So, and then she had some belly button infections. Started like a difficult breathing, and so I'm crying. I'm feeling down. I cannot control my emotion. I cannot control what I'm doing, and then. The doctor comes and they say, oh, you had the postnatal depression, so you need to take medications. I said, no, I'm a Chinese doctor. I do my own way. When you're giving birth, your body is very weak. Your emotion is really down. You're mentally fragile. So as soon as I realized that because of blood deficiency and the body weak, I cannot control my liver functions. So you need some blood tonics. So I take some blood tonic. I immediately back to normal.
Dr. Tan took her blood tonics and recovered her emotional equilibrium. Fortunately, her daughter also gained in strength. And reflecting her story, the orchestral strings felt appropriate. What kind of sounds immediately come to mind when you think about your liver before your experience with your second daughter? So you said that...
Sounds very low, I think, like of energies also, because it's a drainage. Yeah.
So like...
Mood is very low.
Like
I
a
think
hum?
so. Yeah, I think so.
And how would you say that sound changed when you went through that really emotional experience with your daughter?
I think it's more quieter because I don't want to upset people. I always want to be quiet. I don't want to give my emotion to others. I just suppress the emotion, I think.
And how would you say that sound changed after the birth of your daughter and you had this beautiful baby girl? Was the sound still low or did it get high?
I think it get more higher, and then your body inner peace, very, very happy sound, I think. It's a happy sound. Yeah, because when you see your daughter back to normal and you can focus to everything, even you're busy, you don't feel frustrated. You don't feel like a low energy. You're still happy. When you're happy, you're more energies. So that's sounds is much more higher, I think. Everything is just beautiful. So I can use my experience to explain the patient why their emotions are so bad and how can you get better. You want to care people and look after them, be kind to them and get emotional recovery for the livers.
My name's Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz, and I'm the representative of the heart.
And so we move from the liver to the ultimate connecting organ, the heart. And Kenny's heart is critical to his story. He's an agony uncle and holds men's groups, helping people explore their emotions with an open heart.
What I do for a living is help people move from a perspective of fear and survival into love and living.
Kenny draws on his own past experience to help others in his work.
From a very young age, I was used to being a grown-up.
He was only 8 when trauma ripped his life apart.
We lived in Uganda, quite near Idi Amin. My father was working, he was running the Uganda post office, and he got on Idi Amin's death list. And it got to the time where we had to leave without my father. And I remember so clearly on the bed the day before we left, when my father said, "You may never see me again, and you're the head of the family now. Take care of your mother and brother."
Kenny held his father's words very close to his heart as he and his family resettled in the UK, in Wales.
I kind of grew responsible for their emotions. And I remember being on a number 31 bus, and there was a child saying to his mother something about that man. And they pointed to me, or the child pointed to me, and it's like, oh my God, I'm that man. And they see me as a man. Meanwhile, I was used to being a little boy, pretending to be a man, making sure everyone was okay and everything was good and we're all safe and we can carry on. That got me way out of control. I had Tourette's, I had body dysmorphia, I had obsessive compulsive disorder, trichomania, and most of them lasted until my 20s, even 30s. And I had to learn to breathe into the fear and let the fear go by. And then I had to unlearn being a surviving boy. And I literally followed my heart.
Kenny went abroad, travelling and working.
I came back to the UK and I got my closest friends together. And I basically said to them, I need to be met at depth. as I said to them, I've never been to a men's group. We're starting a men's group and you're all in it now. And it just started. It just grew and grew and grew. My relationship with my heart has changed. And I feel I'm in new territory that I wasn't prepared for. I learned from my pain. So I am in a very open and vulnerable stage in life. And how the only thing I can truly do is follow my heart and see whatever changes and tragedies and joys, see them all through.
And the melody of his heart is articulated by the choir. First off, if we take you back to that kind of early childhood relationship with your heart, what would it sound like?
The Osmonds and Crazy Horses, where it goes, wow!
So then I'm imagining we begin with this idea of you have that really quite high-pitched scream-esque, but it's somewhat pushed away. It's very present, but it's muffled.
Yeah, exactly.
How does, if it does, that sound change?
My father's a jazz musician, and there was a lot of Latin music and jazz music, you know, the whole Astrid Gilberto, and that's just in the background. That's just the most wonderful stuff. And for me, my God, I loved the disco. And that was just fun and funky and moving and grooving, and that just brought me alive.
So I'm hearing now, your early childhood, there's like disco groove, but all the time there's that muffled running along. And I'm thinking about what you said about being on the bus and hearing the little boy go, that man. And is that the moment where the muffle goes?
Yes. The more I began to exist as my own person, the clearer the sound. And it can go fast and it can go slow. But there's something very present and serene and sincere. It has depth and expansiveness.
Because of the nature of my condition, I can take the air in, but I can't get the old air out fast enough.
And so to the last of these organs, the lungs. This is Liz. Her relationship with her lungs is complicated.
It all began in 2020, which was issues with my right lung. I was at home, unwell with a persistent cough, and I woke up one morning feeling very, very unwell and got taken into my local hospital where they diagnosed me with a spontaneous pneumothorax, which in English is a collapsed lung. And when you're 35, a collapsed lung is a real rarity. Yeah, it was a lot to take on and a lot to deal with. And then in 2022, it happened again. My world did kind of fall apart again. But I was very driven by wanting to be well again. And now I'm stable, but I have to make adaptations on a daily basis. And the lungs aren't going to get better. They're only going to get worse. And I will need continual care, I think. But I'm determined to take the blessings wherever I can take them, in small and in big ways. Yeah.
And it felt fitting that the lungs should be played out by the brass.
When I think of my lungs, I think about when I'm breathing well or when I'm trying to rebalance my breathing, like lightness and almost like a fluttering, if that makes sense.
So pre-2020, when your lungs just weren't, they were just ticking along?
Yeah.
They were just kind of in the background. Would that sound be that fluttering?
Yes, light and bright and easy, and it flows very well. When I'm not breathing well or when my lungs are struggling, there is a heaviness and a tightness. It's almost gravelly and it's pressured and it's tight.
When we hit 2020 and we hit the right lung collapse, and then we have the second drop which is the second lung collapse. Is that where that really kind of deep guttural sound like comes to the fore?
You're like tinkly and light and fine, and then boom, overwhelming in every sense.
Cacophony.
Yes. It's like you start with one note or one key, and you're going along, and then boom, the first lung collapse happens, and then big drop, and then you build and gradual, and then you go even lower, and it's even harder for even longer. The big, bold energy of both the episodes, if let's call it that, and it's loud and it's full and it's like, whoa. And then, like for any of us, a period of a few seconds of silence where you're in shock and you're like, okay, what the heck just happened? And then you begin the work to try and recover, to move from deep to light, but it's the body versus your will, because it was life-changing. And both times, interestingly, those periods in the recovery, the silence and the stillness, all you want is light and airy and just gentle, something you could ease into and fall asleep to kind of thing.
Finally, composer David Owen Norris brought all the sketches together, piece by piece, to create a symphony, the Organ Symphony, which was played out by the BBC Concert Orchestra and the BBC Singers. Here, the 5 vital organs came together to work in harmony, to perform the movement that is human life. With thanks to our participants, Alison, Steve, Dr. Tan, Kenny and Liz. Thank you also to the BBC Singers, the BBC Concert Orchestra and, of course, our composer and conductor, David Owen Norris. The producer is Maia Miller-Lewis, the executive producer was Joe Rowntree and the editor was Kirsten Lass. The Organ Symphony is a Loftus Media production for BBC Radio 4.
You've been listening to Illuminated from BBC Radio 4. If you want more one-of-a-kind documentaries like this one, then subscribe to the Illuminated feed on BBC Sounds.